Okay, so hi everybody. We are going to start with roundtable, very rich roundtable with many people. First of all, I can tell you that you can use headsets. So just a few logistics points. When you want to talk, you need to press the button on the microphone. Quite easy. If you want to listen to the floor, it is number 0 on the headset. In French, it's number 1, and in English, number 2. Okay? So we can now start this very interesting roundtable, at least in my opinion. We are going to talk about AI, artificial intelligence. We know that there are very important topics now dealing with artificial intelligence. But first of all, I would like to give the floor to Clara Chapaz, our Ministry for AI and Digital Affairs. So please, Clara, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Guillaume. Very happy to be here today. Thank you, Guillaume. Very happy to be here today. I think we're supposed to use both English and French language, so or yeah.
As you prefer, as a translation.
Okay, so I'll go in French, so you can hear a few of the things I wanted to say this morning. But as a quick introduction in English, very happy to be here. This is obviously a very important topic for us as part of the Ministry for AI and Digital Affairs. As you know, France is going to host an international summit February 10th and 11th, and you've been doing tremendous work, both of you actually, under the leadership of Anne Bouvreau to make this summit happen. I'll have a chance to touch on it in a minute. But this is kind of a pre-discussion for us, I think, on some of the very important topics that we'll get to discuss during the summit. So everyone in the room is very welcome to contribute to the summit, and we'll be glad to hear your perspective as well on that event. Moving on to French. Mesdames, Messieurs,
ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted of being here with you today. As you all know, we are experiencing an exceptional technological development with a great progress in AI, especially generative AI and LLMs. These LLMs have a unique scope. They are the result of an innovation that is not new. It's the result of decades of research and shared ambition. The ambition to build a world where we can develop this AI technology, but we also want it to be used by everyone. We want it to be a great source of progress through applications, which we are only discovering the scope of today. I believe it's important. We are only in the early days of this technological revolution. We are only seeing the beginning of its potential, which is why this discussion is timely. We are talking about health, education, culture, the ecological transition as well. We strongly believe that AI can be a force for good. This is what brings us together today. AI has great potential, but it can be a source of risks and hazards as well. And we need to think about how we can regain trust in this technology. I believe that trust is a key word. This is the word that you use in the most relevant way. The opportunities open up to different topics that we need to assess, we need to discuss on an international forum. There is disinformation. We hear a lot about disinformation in today's world. There is manipulation of information that can undermine a society or democracy. It is important to better understand this technology. It is just the beginning, and we still have a long way to go to really grasp the full potential of these models. We need to prevent and counter the risk. It is important. This is key for a well-functioning global order. We are all convinced of that. Challenges, so to address those challenges, we already have a few international frameworks to encourage stakeholders of the industry to make some voluntary commitments. I believe this is going to be a key topic for today's discussions. I'm thinking about the Hiroshima Protocol launched by the G7, the recent discussions about the AI Safety Institute. I will also attend a meeting in San Francisco next week with some of you to talk about this topic. And, of course, there are summits in the UK and in South Korea. And we will then organize the Paris Summit in a few months, 11 weeks to be precise. Several initiatives, quite a few initiatives, different shapes and forms, but they all share one objective. They want to make sure that AI development leads to a safe, sustainable, and responsible and transparent use. We have talked about the AI Safety Institute. Their mission is key, and therefore I would like to remind you that we have a strong ambition for those safety institutes. We want an independent control. We want to have clear, transparent objectives to assess the safety and ethics of these AI edge-cutting technologies. The Bletchley, Park and Seoul declarations are very important. We will talk about that some more in France in February. We believe it is essential to focus not only on the best understanding of these risks and developing trust, we also believe it's important to talk about the positive potential of this innovation. It's important to really focus on what this technology can give to our societies. We want these opportunities to be seized and turned into practical things for everybody. For this summit, under the leadership of Anne Bouvreau, who unfortunately is not with us today, but two of her staff members are here with us, we want to broaden the discussion by integrating other areas that are going to experience major transformations: work, labor, culture, education, the fight against climate change, to mention just a few. We also want to go from a discussion to action, hence the AI for Action Summit name. We want to take practical initiatives to meet those challenges together. We want to focus on the development of AI systems, and we want them to serve the public good. We want to serve everybody in the North and the Global South as well. This is why we want this summit to be inclusive. We want to make sure that all partners can take part, attend. We want to have around the table, just like this morning, all these stakeholders. It is essential to address topics such as the international AI governance, which is going to be one of the highlights of the summit. We are at a crossroad today. The AI-powered technologies are being developed faster and faster. We can seize this opportunity and leverage this potential for the common good of our societies, or we can let the risk and this mistrust settle. We will follow up on the Bletchley, Park and Seoul declarations with new initiatives, trusted AI. Guillaume will talk about that. The reason why we're talking about, trust is more than a symbol. It is a strong message. We want together to develop with more safety this technology so that users and society as a whole can trust it. In France alone, more than 1 person in 2 is, distrust, is wary of AI, worries about the impact of this technology on their daily lives and their work. Am I going to lose my job? How is this technology going to transform my life? These are important questions, and this trust avenue needs to convey some answers. We believe that, we don't have all the questions. It's still the early days, which is why it is important to work together. It's important to have voluntary commitments. What is the role of these commitments when you think about the regulation? This is something that we're going to talk about this morning. How are those commitments implemented by major AI corporations? It is good to have some commitments, but it's also important to see how they are translated into practical actions by companies. And how can startups monitor or follow up those commitments without slowing down the innovation momentum? The ecosystem is still young. There are a lot of resources and technologies developed everywhere. All technologies that start need to have the same ambition in terms of trust without impeding their development. Beyond the statements, how can we make sure that those commitments are complied with independently and in a credible way? Those are many topics that we will explore during this roundtable session, and we will continue talking about that in San Francisco and at the February Paris Summit. We strongly believe that a constructive dialogue between states, between companies, between institutions, but also involving civil society is essential to make sure that AI remains a tool that serves everybody, that serves the whole society. Thank you for your attention and thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your work on this more trusted AI, more innovative AI, and I will be happy to hear about your contributions during this roundtable. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre. Thank you very much, dear Clara. So we are now going to do this roundtable on trust in AI. As Clara said, we want to talk about trust, and because security, safety, different means we have are just tools to build trust. And as you mentioned, many people are already afraid by AI. Maybe they're right. There are good reasons to be afraid sometimes. So the way the different stakeholders involved together to build this trust is very important. So I am Guillaume Poupard. I work for the French group La Poste. Maybe you don't know, but La Poste does a lot of artificial intelligence for its own application and for its business. And I am also very pleased to help for the organization of the next Paris Summit. We'll talk at the end. So, if you agree, for this roundtable, we have a very clever plan. First talking about history, then talking about the present, and finally talking about the future. We are going to make it simple. So we are very lucky because we have a lot of people who are involved into this building of trust. I will ask you to be quite short because we have 1 hour and a half. It's long, but we are many people, so I want to be sure that everybody will be able to share his opinion and his ideas. And we will immediately start with the history. So, as Clara said, we know that the necessity of being involved in the construction of trust has been done in different contexts. At the G7 with the Hiroshima Protocol, at a national level, we have observed what happened in the US at the White House. In Europe, of course, the European Commission wants to build trust also in AI. And of course, during the first 2 summits in Bletchley Park and in Korea, the idea was to set a list of voluntary commitments to help big companies developing frontier AI to be more transparent maybe and to have a good way to explain how they deal with security issues. So if you agree, we could start with Robert Reich, who worked for the AI Safety Institute in the US as a senior advisor, if I'm right. And maybe if you could start with the US position.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rob Reich. I am, in my usual life, a professor at Stanford University, where I've worked for 30 years. And since April of 2024, I have been on leave to work at the relatively newly established US AI Safety Institute, where, as Guillaume says, I work as a senior advisor. Maybe to set the table for the orientation or the lane in which the US AI Safety Institute works as a feature and not the totality of thinking about AI governance. So in this respect, to look to history. The AI Safety Institute, as you know, was announced at the Bletchley Park Summit by Vice President Harris, was stood up as a new entity within the Department of Commerce in the United States in February of 2024, and began its work just then 6-7 months ago. It is lodged within something called NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and that agency within the Department of Commerce is more than 100 years old. I mention this because in invoking NIST as the body that houses the AI Safety Institute, it suggests that the important ambition of the AI Safety Institute is to advance, in the first instance, the science of AI safety, to establish the empirical underpinnings for understanding in the first principle matter how it is that AI ML models work and in particular, how we can advance our understanding of how to develop them and deploy them in a safe manner. So to use in language that in certain respects is even more familiar to me as an academic, the AI Safety Institute is devoted to metrology, the science of measurement itself. This is to emphasize here for you that AI governance as a large topic is, of course, a matter of law, policy, and regulation that emanates from government, and that can include things like antitrust approaches or Digital Market Act here in the European Union, but also, in my view, must include firmly based scientific enterprises to establish the best possible empirical understanding of the models themselves and how to develop them in a safe way. So that has been the chief orientation of the AI Safety Institute to date, and will in fact then establish the background or the orientation, the frame for the meeting that will take place in 1 week in San Francisco. The U.S. is looking forward to hosting the first convening of the International Network of AI Safety Institutes, 10 government members initially, along with technical expertise from industry, civil society, as well as academia. There will be 3 independent working groups that will begin their work there, establish, we hope, a pattern of ongoing coordination around the scientific understanding on, 1, testing and evaluation of frontier or highly capable models. Number 2, risk management frameworks for those as well. And number 3, various technical and policy mechanisms for mitigating risks from synthetic content. I'd be happy to add more to that, but perhaps I'll just end with a final note in a kind of macro picture from history, since you invite that here. I think for any of us working on the topic of AI governance, it behooves us to remind ourselves how young or nascent, first of all, computer science as a field itself is. Only really came into existence in the 1950s and 60s as a field of study. And then AI, ML, something even more recent that actually had some powerful effects in the world. The profession of people in computer science, or technologists, especially those building the highly capable models in the companies, have not had decades to develop the most robust set of scientific, empirical understandings of the relationship between what the models do and how they behave in the world, or how they're designed and deployed. This is to suggest that no matter how we think about AI governance, we should do all that we can to preserve an international coordination around advancing science, because this will, in the first principle, ensure that the best understanding of the safe design and deployment of the models is advancing at the same time as governance and policy and regulation at large. To put it perhaps too bluntly, I sometimes think of AI ML as developmentally immature, and I mean that both as modest provocation, but also as simple description, because compared to other significant fields of inquiry, I think here particularly of biomedical research and gene editing or CRISPR, certainly another extremely important scientific advance of the 21st century. Biomedical research has had far more time to develop a set of regulatory frameworks, a set of internal understandings that underpin the science of its work, whereas AI ML is still in its teenager phase of development. So ensuring that we can find a way to illuminate a path forward for international coordination with industry, with civil society, with academia, and of course among governments, for the scientific understanding and measurement and preparation for the safe deployment of models is essential.
Thank you very much, Rob. And we hope we'll be able to work very well with the US Safety Institute for a long time, of course. Then I would like to give the floor to Henri de Zoet, who now works at the Oxford Martin AI Governance Initiative, if I'm right, and with the former AI advisor to UK Prime Minister, who had a great impact, of course, on the development of the policy in the UK. So, please.
Thank you. And thank you very much for having me here. I just want to make a couple of quick point about the importance of the. I'm going to take these off because it reverberates in my ears. But I'm going to just make a couple of quick points about the importance of the voluntary commitments and how we kind of got there on them. I think one of the very, very crucial things about them is that they are so clearly industry-led. So there is so much expertise that sits in these companies that we don't necessarily have in government. And therefore, the starting point with the voluntary commitments, that there were already some responsible scaling policies out there that companies had already done that were clearly a good precedent. And the aim being, well, can we get more countries to identify with that and more companies to identify with that, to understand it as a way forward that everybody could get behind. And I think one of the really powerful things about the voluntary commitments is that you've got Middle Eastern companies from all over the world. It's truly kind of global selection. So we have companies from the Middle East, companies from North America, European companies, and also Asian companies, and crucially, Chinese companies. So this is the first time you've had that kind of commitment to it. Now, one of the things I'm most excited about the French AI Action Summit is the brilliance of its name, because it is action. And I think this next set of voluntary commitments, so what we will see, I hope, from companies in France in February is action. Fully written drafts, implementation details, what they're doing, what are the evaluations that are involved, what is being done as a result of the research that they might have carried out. All of these things help everybody in this room and everybody in government and everybody in other companies to understand a way forward that we can all get behind with these commitments. I think crucially, it's these kind of summits, and which is why I'm so thankful the French are hosting it, and it will clearly be a huge success, is having that kind of pressure from leaders across the world, from ministers across the world, who are saying, this is the kind of thing that we want to see. This is what the kind of thing that we want to see globally, and we know that you have to lead it as companies. So this is an incredibly fast-moving technology, faster than I think anything has ever moved. And that's why we all have to work with each other to try and get there on it. And that's why I think the voluntary commitments are a very, very important part of ensuring that we share best practice between companies and ensuring that governments understand what's actually happening in these models. So I'm very excited for what we'll see at the summit. I'm very grateful that so many companies are involved and that we're having this we're having the French pulling everybody together for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henry. So now let's have a look at the European Commission view on artificial intelligence. We are lucky to have Tatiana Evas from the EU AI Office with us. So please, Tatiana.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's following with two very interesting presentations. I would like to bring some European perspective. And I have been at the European Commission actually following from very beginning, the conception of AI Act. And through all the stages of negotiations. So I guess I'm the best set for the historical panel, but also for the G7. For European Union, with two keywords, which we are really in the center of our policy is excellence and trust. So trust is very important, and the guardrails to set a framework for the use of these technologies is very important. But we should also not forget that excellence and actually positive uptake of these technologies is very important. And from 2018, when the European Commission put the strategic agenda, how we wanted to develop, these two keywords were always essential for us. And as you know, the part of this package in 2021, European Union was the first global jurisdiction which put comprehensive proposal for safety legislation, AI Act, and I want to underline that it's really safety legislation, so it's based on product safety legislation, and that's formed our thinking. But here again, I want to underline that EU is not only about regulation, it's also as much as about excellence and promoting development of technologies. In last year, we have set up AI Office, and AI Office, I guess, also unique in the global landscape because it combines research and regulatory powers. While I agree with Rob that scientific excellence is really key, and that's why EU is actively participating in all levels at the UN, OECD, G7, G20, bilateral fora, of course, safety summits to advance this excellence, but we also need regulatory authority to enforce. And for us at the EU, this ability to monitor and enforce, and that's what also Henry has mentioned, we really need also at the global level the monitoring tools which will allow us to make trustworthy the commitments which companies take through voluntary pledges. So for that matter, our AI office, I think, is really unique because we would have very strong scientific profiles or research, and that's why we already collaborate with US and UK and other jurisdictions, Japan, to develop this scientific excellence. But we also have 3 units within AI office. So we have 2 units which focus on the regulatory affairs and 3 units which focus on excellence. So this is also shows our global vision. And with time, we hope to have about 140 people working for the AI office. And also maybe to highlight that at the European Union, we don't focus just on the most advanced or frontier models as in other jurisdictions. We understand high risk, we understand risk in a broader sense. However, while we want to focus on risk, I think it's very important. Another 3 keywords, let's say, which drive our policy. First is risk-based approach. So any kind of regulatory measures must be commensurate to the risk that this model could process. So risk-based approach is very important. Secondly is the technology neutrality. We don't want to actually punish any technology or to regulate any specific technology, but rather specific use cases. So because the one and same technology could play out very different depending on the context which will you use. So this application, the focus on application or use context is a key. And third, and it also relates to the 2 comments we had before, is the state of the art. So any measure we can should be based on the state of the art. Of course, it's also, we want to advance innovation in the market. So of course, we want companies to innovate and come to the new solutions. Therefore, the measures which we address related to risk mitigation, for example, on cybersecurity or any other risk would be related to the state of the art. Which brings me back to this importance, of course, of research and scientific, because our yardstick is the state of the art. And of course, for the development of the state of the art, both for frontier or most advanced capable models, but also for high risk, we work very closely with the industry. For high risk, we work very closely through international standardization organizations, for example, SC42 and ISO-IC and JTC21 at the European standardization organizations. And this is also important because we rely on industry to come up with the standards, of course, under the regulatory objectives which we set in the AI Act, but still it's industry-driven. And on what concerns general-purpose AI models, we have just started recently the code of practice process, about which we will speak later. And maybe as my last comment, we also, in terms of voluntary commitments, in addition to G7 and Bletchley and Seoul, which we also participated, we also set up so-called AI Pact, which is the voluntary commitments by companies which companies undertake in preparation for the full application of AI Act. And at the moment, we have over 1,400 companies which have committed to our so-called Pillar 1 of expressed interest in AI Pact, and over 140 companies which actually took concrete pledges in related to AI Pact. So I think we are quite active in all fronts, and I'm happy to contribute to further discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. And I have to say that La Poste signed the pact, of course. Then finally, for this first round, I would like to give the floor to Chris Maisrol, who is director of the Frontier Model Forum, yeah, and who had a great impact on what has been done since now.
Thank you, and thank you for the honor of being able to speak here. I think I'll start by building on some comments that were made earlier in this discussion and really try to establish what it is that we need trust for, why trust is so important. And I think just at a very high level, it's worth remembering that prior versions of general purpose technologies like electricity, the internal combustion engine, the challenge with those technologies was that we knew what they would be able to do if we could build them, but we weren't sure if we could build them. The engineering took 30 to 50 years to really get to a point where those technologies were deployed at mass scale. And we had a long window, and we knew exactly what they would be able to do that allowed us to build up good safety mechanisms for them. With AI, it's the exact opposite situation. We know how to engineer these systems. We do not always know what they will be capable of doing. And because we do not always know what they will be capable of doing, it's hard to assure the safety of those systems. And on top of that, it's progressing so fast, I don't think we can count on a 30 to 50 year window to figure out exactly how to make the system safe. Which means from an industry perspective, and for those of you who aren't aware of the Frontier Model Forum, we're an industry-supported nonprofit focused on frontier AI safety. From an industry perspective, it puts you in a very unique situation where you're able to build a product that it's incumbent upon you to figure out how to assure the safety of those systems. And it's incumbent upon you to build trust in that product and in those systems. And to get back to the history of how we got here, all of the voluntary commitment processes that were pointed to earlier, really from an industry perspective, I think came out of a sense that we need to signal and work with external partners to build up trust because we don't have the science necessarily settled in terms of what to do. So we need to work with partners like the AI Safety Institutes and others to build up that scientific knowledge base. We also need to coordinate together to be able to signal that we are capable of cooperating on what those standards for safety should be. And so the mechanism, I really want to kind of foot stomp a point that Henry made about the coordinating mechanism that the Bletchley Park process summits have provided, as well as the G7 and other processes, where what that's enabled is global coordination across industry at scale on the most important safety issues that we face today. And it really cannot be understated, I think, the importance of that process and the progress that it's implemented or that's been able to happen over the last year. I don't think we would be nearly as far along as we are now if that process hadn't kickstarted so many rich discussions. And so I guess I would just leave you with this one kind of point of just how important it is to continue building on the success of the voluntary commitments that have been made, as well as the institutional mechanisms that have been stood up over the last 12 to 18 months, whether it's through the Bletchley Park process, through the EU AI Act, et cetera. We've got a lot of infrastructure in place, and I think it's important to continue building on it in the years to come.
Thank you very much. So now we can dive into the actual situation. It's an opportunity for the different stakeholders, starting with the industry, to explain what is their feeling with those voluntary commitments. We could have an all-day discussion about this, of course, but I propose that we start with two companies, Microsoft and Amazon Web Services, and then the other industry that are with us will help us to understand in a complementary way what happens. So if you agree, we could start with Chris Sharrock. Chris is the Vice President for UN Affairs and International Organizations at Microsoft Corporation. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks very much, Guillaume, and thanks very much to the Paris Peace Forum for bringing us together, and to the French government for the leadership that they're showing through the summit that we're all looking forward to in February. And it's quite convenient to come after Chris, because I think Chris sort of emphasized quite well a point that the minister really set out at the start, which is that we're united here around the need to build trust. And I think, you know, there is a sort of self-interested aspect to that if you think about it from a business perspective. In the end, people use technology that they trust. And when you're developing a product that you want to bring to market, establishing yourself as a trustworthy actor and establishing trust in that product is absolutely essential. And so, you know, our journey, certainly in Microsoft, around responsible AI, and I think this is the point that Henry made about the expertise that already existed in companies. Certainly our journey, and I know many of the journeys around the table began some years before, for example, the White House voluntary commitments were agreed. And some of the kind of broad framework that we have within the company has been around developing a series of responsible AI principles, creating an office of responsible AI for both internal reviews and external engagement, and then cultivating responsible AI standards, where we've actually gone through 2 versions of that, and those standards are then a fundamental part within the company of how our internal teams are implementing and how we then assess what those teams are doing. So this is very much a journey that's been some years in the making. Now, this is where I'm going to sort of feel like the most boring guest at a dinner party, you know, the guy who just talks about what he's been doing, but I think that's what you wanted me to do. So let me give you a little bit of a flavor of how we've actually been implementing the voluntary commitments. And I'll talk, I suppose, to the 3 headings of the White House voluntary commitments: safety, security, and trust. So starting with safety, look, we have committed to internal and external security testing of our AI systems before their release. And what I think we'll probably talk about a lot today is red teaming. We established our AI red team back in 2019 to identify AI vulnerabilities. We've then continued developing those red teaming tools, and we've made them open access. So in February of this year, we released a red teaming accelerator, a Python risk identification tool for generative AI, which enables developers to proactively find risks in their Gen AI applications. And we've also worked with third-party evaluators at NewsGuard, an organization advancing journalistic integrity, to evaluate risks and assess for mitigations relating to the abuse of deepfakes. On security, clearly, cybersecurity is an enormous priority. It is the #1 priority for the company right now. We've committed to investing in cybersecurity and insider threat safeguards, so we continue to invest in that. In May 2024, this year, we launched the Secure Future Initiative, which really was aimed at addressing the growing scale of cyber attacks that we have. And then in regard to AI, we continue to prioritize security, including to protect model weights, and reaffirmed our commitment to investing in security controls as part of signing the Frontier AI safety commitments. And then on the third bucket, trust, well, we've committed essentially to sharing information across the industry and with government, civil society, and academia on managing AI risks. I think that the work that's been done by the Frontier Model Forum has been really absolutely integral to this, and I think being one of the co-founders of that, along with others here today, was an important step for us. We then continue to publish as a company. We've published around the global governance questions, a blueprint for how we see potentially the future of AI governance. We tried to feed the global conversation, including at the UN, by publishing our own thoughts on global governance, what we'd seen happening in other industries that are governed at an international level. And Natasha Crampton, who's our responsible AI officer, took part in the UN's high-level advisory board. So we feel that we've stepped up on those 3 regards. And then just to pick up on a couple of issues that have come up in the conversation so far, the minister referred to disinformation. I think this is a place where we can also point to voluntary action that the industry has come together around. We have committed to developing robust mechanisms to ensure that users know when content is AI generated, such as a watermarking system. a measure we call the Tech Accord, which was launched earlier this year to combat abusive deepfakes, where we launched a portal for candidates to be able to report abusive deepfakes in the context of elections. And we think we're making progress there, although of course there's more to do. On the research point that Robert was talking about, we've absolutely committed to prioritizing research on the societal risks that AI systems can pose, and we've launched an accelerating foundation model research program to try and make the leading foundation models more accessible to the research community. Now, I think you wanted in this conversation to also just sort of think, well, how do we gauge the progress on this? Can we actually point to any improvement in sentiment around the consumers? I think it's a really important question. I'm sure others will tease it out. I mean, just to kind of set the table on that, it's hard, I think, to be able to point to the finishing line on this. It's hard actually to give yourself a really robust metric for how we're doing in that. I mean, I think a glib answer would be to point to the uptake in use, that people are buying and using this technology, which does imply a degree of trust. But I think we can't be complacent on that. And I think that, you know, to close, the multi-stakeholder conversation that we've got here is absolutely key to making sure that in the face of a continually advancing technology, we're taking the pulse, especially of civil society, as we continue to frame our action. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's very clear. Then for Amazon Web Services, we have Sasha Rubel. It's not Tanura, but Sasha is with us. You work for public policy in AI for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So please.
Thank you very much, Guillaume. I'm very happy to follow up on what Chris just talked about in terms of the importance of multi-stakeholder consultation, and just really want to start off by thanking you, Guillaume, and you, Henri, for your approach in terms of ensuring this multi-stakeholder dimension, which is essential to ensure that these commitments are technically feasible and that they're implemented. It's surreal to think that it's only 18 months ago that the former Prime Minister of the UK, Rishi Sunak, first announced even the intention to host a safety summit. And Henri, congratulations to you for the incredible work that you did in pulling that off. But since then, we've come a really long way. We've committed to the White House voluntary AI commitments. We've supported the G7 Hiroshima process, engaged and supported the Bletchley and Seoul commitments alongside the AI Pact and the Munich Tech Accord, and are supporting the further globalization of these commitments at the OECD, where we're helping to develop a standardized reporting mechanism, which is also really essential, particularly for startups, for companies to demonstrate how they're operationalizing these commitments so that we can learn from one another. I think the formation of the global network of AI safety institutes is another really important proof point about the world's resolve to ensure we have the right institutions and structure and exchange of best practices in place to enhance the benefits but also mitigate the risks. And we're hopeful that next week's inaugural summit and convening of the global network in San Francisco will lead to an enduring new mechanism so that we can all learn from each other. I want to make it clear that for us, we are convinced that responsibility drives trust, that trust drives adoption, and that fundamentally that adoption will drive innovation. So the debate about responsibility or innovation is a fake one. Responsibility and innovation need to go hand in hand so that we can unlock the social but also the economic opportunities that AI represents. President Macron recently said, and it's emblematic of your approach of the Action Summit, that we shouldn't just focus on misuse, we also need to focus on misuse. And so unlocking those opportunities in a safe way is at the heart of our DNA, and democratizing access to that innovation is at the heart of it all. From the outset at AWS, we've prioritized a responsible AI approach through really emphasizing the translation of principles into practice. Because if you talk to policymakers, they'll agree that transparency, accountability, explainability, these are important. But if you talk to an engineer will say, okay, what does that mean in practice? And so we've spent a lot of time looking at how to operationalize those principles, but also launching more than 70 responsible AI capabilities and features, more than 500 research papers, because because we see responsibility as everyone's responsibility, and that's why we train across the board, our staff, but also our customers. Ahead of the Safety Summit, we shared a detailed update, and I just want to share very briefly a couple of elements that we've worked on since making these commitments. We've built in security scanning in what we call Amazon Q Developer, new guardrails to detect and block harmful content in our foundation model Amazon Titan, and improved data privacy protections in Amazon Bedrock. We've also expanded information we provide in our AI service cards, which is a kind of transparency documentation, to make sure that we make that available to customers who want to understand what kind of data was used to train a model. And we've taken steps to red team our models for AI safety risks. We launched, similarly to Chris, watermarking initiatives because we acknowledge that disinformation is at the top of mind for many people, but we're not done yet. One of the things that we're placing a particular emphasis on is open sourcing our resources that allow you to evaluate models for risks, because we recognize that open source and democratization of access to AI, including safety tools, go hand in hand. I'll close by saying that one of the things that we see in terms of what's next is that we need to invest in state-of-the-art science and technical feasibility, and we need to focus on implementation. Regulatory uncertainty is one of the biggest blockers to date in AI adoption, and Mario Draghi emphasized that very clearly in the report that just came out, focused on Europe's competitiveness. So we need to make it easy to scale and to understand compliance. Startups spend around 30% of their funding on compliance, so making sure that we can build off of international standards, as Chris said, is absolutely essential. We need to think about how governance is really only one piece of the AI safety equation, because the reality, as Chris evoked, is that the science is evolving quickly, and so we need this multi-stakeholder approach to invest in science. And then lastly, we need a shared vocabulary. One of the things that I hear the most, Guillaume, when I talk to customers is we'd love to test our models for safety, but safety against what? And I think your call out, Chris, on metrology, and also Rob, are really important ones, is we need to be investing in developing a shared vocabulary and metrics against what we are testing. But because the state of the art is advancing so quickly, we also need to make sure that we're outcome oriented and process based, because the science is advancing fundamentally really quickly. I'll just close by saying Vilas Dar has a statement that I love, which is looking at how to build a future that's tech enabled and human-centered, and we're convinced that the only way that we can do that is by investing in the science, collaborating, and making sure that responsibility is not just the starting point, but also the middle point and the end point of all the work that we're doing.
Thank you very much, Sasha. It's very clear. Then we are lucky since we have many companies with us, so I will ask them to have if they have overviews or want to point a specific thing to take 2 minutes each. So first of all, Ryan Baumeister, you are Vice President for Product Policy at OpenAI. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very moved by Rob's context on this moment in time for this technology and this place that we are at in humanity, which no one has really crossed. And I'm really humbled to be at the table with you all as a group of people across industries, countries, nationalities, willing to get it right. I lead our product policy and responsible use work at OpenAI. So my responsibilities are to define what the responsible policies are and the way that we want the world to be using these tools and the outcomes we want to see, and ultimately how to guarantee that our mission is fulfilled, which is that AGI really benefits all of humanity, and that is measured by the outcomes and the way that society gets better while risks are being mitigated. This is the true orientation of our company. Our mission is to see this through, and we build all of our models, all of our products with safety and responsibility at the forefront, very close to Nuja's thesis that that responsibility is required if we are to deliver value and if we are able to leverage and deliver these models in a way that lifts up humankind and makes lives fundamentally better. To achieve our mission, we know that we need to partner, and we view it as incredibly critical that not only the labs and the AI labs are cooperating with governments, but they're cooperating with each other, that we are looking across nation states and lines, and we are doing this in a way that is coordinated because the stakes are high, and we care about getting this right for all people. And so we're very glad to be at the table with you today. I wanted to talk about some of the commitments which we align with and have endorsed across the kind of history and evolution. So, of course, there's the White House commitments that focus on safety and trust, as Chris mentioned. We are committed to safety and responsibility work at every layer of our stack. So that includes robust red teaming, both internally but also externally. So for GPT-4o, we actually partnered with 70 external red teamers. We partner with Microsoft. We partner with Rob and the ACs, and we are committed to robust evaluation of these models before they launch. Part of that process also includes our preparedness framework. So this is an industry-leading framework where we assess the model capabilities, especially in high-risk dual-use areas like cyber or chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear weapons, or model autonomy, or its persuasion skills. And we conduct really robust extensive red teaming and analysis of those model capabilities so that we can share and be incredibly transparent about our technical opinion on where these models are at, what they're able to do, and what the risks are that all of us need to be working on in order to mitigate. For the Bletchley Declaration, we are very aligned that the responsibility work is across the entire AI deployment and development lifecycle. So that includes responsibilities not just on the model companies, but also developers who use these tools. An area where we support that, for example, is we open and offer our moderation endpoints or our classifiers that look and detect for AI prompts or generations that either are harmful or could be misused. We offer those tools to developers for free to use our platforms because we want to encourage an overall ecosystem that is safe and that is building positive applications and outcomes with our models. For the Seoul AI safety commitments, those kind of highlight the importance of monitoring and risk monitoring and enforcement. This is where I'm currently spending a lot of my work at OpenAI. We robustly and believe in monitoring for how these tools are used, especially as the world adopts. We have hundreds of millions of users using our products now, and it's important, and it's very important for us to layer not only our work at the model level in terms of safe responses and alignment, but also the way people are using our tools, ensuring we understand that, ensuring we're incentivizing that, ensuring that we're helping people do positive work with our AI models, and we're finding misuse, we're detecting it, we're enforcing on it, we're mitigating it, and we're working with other partners on those strategies. So another place that we are proud of is how we share information with not only distribution platforms like Meta, but also the continuing government partnerships that we are seeing to evolve and ensure we are detecting and identifying the right risks and examples of misuse. For the EU AI Pact and Act, we are looking forward to full implementation, working with you all on the requirements and really kind of setting the standards in that stage. And I think from a commitment standpoint, the things that are important to us are the points that I would love to kind of land. One is this has been brought up by Henri, but the need for a coordinated and synthesized approach to these commitments and to these requirements on companies. It will be impossible for these labs to be able to meet a patchwork, fragmented landscape of requirements and tests. And I think the risk there is that we all, we don't get it right with the strongest, most unified frameworks, that we are fractured and that we miss things and there are blind spots because of the chaotic and the many permutations of requirements and regulations. I think second, we totally agree with the point around being science-based and evidence-based. We have to start with the technology. It is our job as industry to offer that to you all and to be experts on that technology. And we really need your expertise on risks and the types of work that we need to do, for example, on CBRN or cyber, or the ways that government and policymaker insights need to combine with our technological expertise. We know that that partnership is critical, and both sides have something to give. I think third is making sure that these frameworks advance as the technology and as the models capabilities advance. So we need these frameworks to be both flexible, but also, of course, comprehensive and good at risk mitigation. But we need to kind of anticipate the way that this landscape is going to change across time in order to develop frameworks that can move with those changes and those advancements in things like model capabilities. And then we are also just very aligned with the EU AI Act's premise that we need monitoring monitoring and the kind of regulation frameworks that are both comprehensive, but also do not kind of stifle innovation or overly technical. And we need our innovation protected in order to continue delivering the most valuable and societally impactful positive products that we can. In closing, just really happy to be here. We are super supportive of safety at every layer. We know that this is critical to getting our mission right, and it's what we're here to do, is to make the world more positive given the positive impacts of AI.
Thank you, Ryan. It was 2 very, very long minutes, but very interesting. Thank you very much. Next, we have Michael Celito, the head of Global Affairs at Anthropic.
Great. Thanks for having me here today, and thank you to the government of France, both for organizing this session and, of course, the Peace Forum, and also the upcoming summit in February. I think this is an extremely important topic. Voluntary commitments and transparency are really a critical tool to building trust in this technology at this stage of its development. Anthropic was really pleased to be one of the leaders in helping to negotiate a really strong set of commitments with the White House last year, which I think sort of set the stage for a lot of commitments that followed down the path, including the Bletchley Declaration, the Frontier AI Safety Commitments in Seoul, and then we've also signed on and endorsed other commitments such as Thorn in child safety and the Munich Elections Compact that our colleagues at Microsoft helped to lead. I think now that we have really broad coverage in terms of the topics and issues that various commitments are meeting, the most important thing is to actually implement them and have some accountability with developers that they're living up to what they have sort of said to. Ultimately, if we want to have an ecosystem that builds trust and creates incentives for safety, we need to have that accountability with the developers. Anthropic's approach here has really been to rapidly prototype things that we think are key components for AI safety, publish and generate public knowledge for the world. We've also, as one of the founding members of the Frontier Model Forum, we've also founded the forum with the idea that the forum can be a place to synthesize that knowledge among developers and then publish these sort of public knowledge products as well. In 2 minutes, I don't have time to speak comprehensively about everything that we're doing, so I'm just going to focus on one particular framework that we've helped to pioneer that aligns with the White House commitments and the Frontier AI safety commitments that we made, which is our responsible scaling policy. Anthropic was the first company to develop a responsible scaling policy, which is a safety and security protocol for safely advancing AI by implementing stringent safety and security measures as capabilities increase. And while it's really important to have some flexibility at this stage of the development of the technology to adapt as the technology adapts, it's also really critical that you have some specifics that you're testing and holding yourself account for. I think it's been recognized that there are like 200 statements of principles, AI principles out in the world, and that's great, but for developers, and I think Sasha mentioned this with engineers, you really need to have something that is this very specific line that you can test and evaluate for and know whether you're doing it or you're not doing it. And so for us, the components of an effective safety and security plan include things like model capability thresholds, specified safeguards that are commensurate with the risk, regular testing of models for these capability thresholds using a combination of empirical evaluations, expert threat modeling, red teaming. Working with the government AI safety institutes has been a really critical piece of this as well, as they bring in additional specific subject matter expertise. And then plans for how you're going to ensure that development is occurring in a safe manner and that you're deploying in a safe manner. As model capabilities increase, you need to have more stringent measures to protect both the technology in its development stage and also at the deployment stage. And then I think the critical piece here is that it's great if individual companies do good work inside, but others need to be able to see this. You have to be able to externalize this to create a model and to create accountability. And so for us, that includes public disclosure of risk management approaches, particularly around catastrophic risks such as capability thresholds and safeguards. Public reporting of testing procedures to ensure that companies are actually living up to the standards that they've set out for themselves. Sometimes you may need to redact some sensitive information, but you can certainly put out enough that can help the public build some trust. And then public reporting on safety measures undertaken and their effectiveness. Anthropic is a safety company. One of the things that we really try to do is pioneer technical safety research and publish results that really help everybody meet higher standards. Just in closing, we published the first version of our responsible scaling policy last year, and then we've recently published an updated version with a number of lessons learned that I don't have time to get into, but the goal here is to help other developers and regulators sort of understand what goes into developing and implementing these policies, and help us learn collectively where there may be some more need for international coordination. And then the last point I'll make is standardized reporting is really key. Sasha also mentioned this. We've been active participants in the OECD process, which has been great. We'd like to see that be broader. We'd like to see ultimately those reports be public, because that should be the goal of transparency, is get information into the hands of the public. And then the last sort of piece of this is really how do we build additional work around third-party evaluations and monitoring. We're very big fans of the US and UK AI safety institutes, which have been doing great work here. And I think that's just sort of only the start, and we'll talk a lot more about it in San Francisco next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Then we have Alexandra Belias, who is head of product policy at Google DeepMind.
Thank you. Michael was just talking about accountability, which is such an important word. It reminded me last year there was an article that was trying to see how companies had progressed on the warehouse commitments. And so that's something that we don't really see, kind of progress, but also what's next. So in terms of progress, I want to be one of the most boring people on the table to tell you everything we've done, but I only have 2 minutes. We have published, actually, our progress, if you want to find it online. A few things that I'd like to mention. So one of the warehouse commitments is about exchanging information between companies and with governments on safety risks. So it's amazing to have Chris in front of me, because that was one of the things that DeepMind with other labs have also done. And Chris has done a brilliant job in kind of being in these roundtable discussions and kind of compiling all the information, especially on the scientific side. Another nice example and a commitment was about watermarking. And so for us at DeepMind, we launched something called SynthID, which is a watermarking tool to help identify AI-generated content. So just a few weeks ago, we open sourced the text watermarking for SynthID, which is a kind of a nice step. USAC also invited us next week in San Francisco to speak briefly about SynthID. In the synthetic content work stream. And for me, it's a nice loop in terms of, work on watermarking was ongoing, but the commitments enabled it to kind of also be connected to the policy discussions. And then in San Francisco, it will be the opportunity to think about, what's next once you have kind of a better technology, but also an AI that keeps on evolving and becoming kind of more and more capable. So just to move in terms of what's next, a lot of new discussions are taking place, which is great, because I don't think commitments should be static. I think they should continuously improve and evolve as, we understand what the challenges are in terms of implementation, as thresholds are increasing as well. So a few people mentioned the OECD's work, which is really brilliant. The team has been thinking about how to create a voluntary reporting framework around the G7 Hiroshima process. It's not easy, I think, because its principles can be quite high level, but they have made a real effort to think kind of what are the governments are doing? How do we avoid having, loads of duplicating reporting frameworks? And I think the key word here is interoperability. So we look forward to seeing what will become, potentially public as well in the future. And then the kind of crucial thing that I think everyone is excited about is the summits from Bletchley to Seoul to Paris, which is, I think, the minister said in 11 weeks. And maybe just to focus on 2 pillars of work, which are kind of close to kind of my heart almost. One of them is the Frontier AI Safety Commitments with the FSF, the Frontier Safety Frameworks that we published last year. We'll have an update by the Paris Summit. It's really exciting seeing the UK AC, who are also having a convening next week in San Francisco. They have really framed 2 days with researchers discussing kind of best practices and lessons from the frontier safety frameworks. And they're really framing this as on the road to Paris. So we're looking forward to seeing the outputs of this. And then, Rob, you talked about metrology, which I think is essential. So same, for your meeting next week, we look forward to seeing what the network of ACs will discuss. And I think, Guillaume, you had a working group meeting last week where you were talking about the network of ACs being kind of under your work. So really excited to see the connections between all these discussions.
Okay, thank you very much. So time is running, so I'm not sure Beatrice Evral and Kathleen Kello are with us, so we save time. Maybe a few words about the involvement of independent evaluation and civil society. Nick McCain, you are Vice President for Strategy and Innovation at the Patrick McGovern Foundation, so if you can explain us what can be your role in this domain.
happily, thank you. And I'll be relatively brief. For those that aren't familiar with the Patrick D. McGovern Foundation, we're a global philanthropy actively involved in trying to define, as Sasha said, what is the human-centered, what is the tech-enabled human-centered future we want as AI becomes a prevalent part of our society. I do think that civil society plays a critical role in certainly the evaluation and sort of providing an important check and balance on some of these commitments, and I applaud the corporate voices in the room for the work that they've done to open source, open up methods, frameworks. But as a participant and major funder of the AI Safety Fund, which we participate in with the Frontier Model Forum and other partners, one thing I think we know is that the technical expertise required to actually be an appropriate check on these systems does not scale. This is not something that exists at scale in civil society. What can scale is civil society's ability to actually imagine what that human-centered future should be, to be the sort of moral, intellectual, sort of guiding voice on, we talk about trust, we talk about safety in service of what, right? We can say a safe outcome or a safe, run a red teaming process to enable a use case, to trust a use case for a particular product to be able to be used in its particular way. That doesn't speak to the broader big picture aspiration we have as a society as AI becomes integrated into our work and into our lives in countless ways. That is scalable across civil society. Civil society knows the communities that they represent better than certainly industry and government, can articulate their values, their needs, and their wants. That is where I see civil society's critical role. I don't think it is the private sector's job nor appropriate role to sort of define what it is that these tools can and should do for our lives. Their job is to drive innovation, and have done that exceptionally well in this particular case. But the vision for what the future should actually look like, I think, sits in the hands of a different group, certainly in conversation with those stakeholders. So that is something we're working to enable very sort of consistently and aggressively here at PGMF through the work that we do as a funder, funding partners that are engaged in this process, really listening to the communities they represent, lifting up their values and expectations for the technology, empowering them to be able to ask the right questions about these models, to be informed about even the fundamentals of how they work, so that not that they can become the folks that can use the open source red teaming tools necessarily, but instead to be powerful voices at the table, I think is a critical piece of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nicolas Miaille, maybe you can give a perspective of a French company. You are the CEO of Plus Naval. Just a few minutes, please.
Yep. Merci beaucoup, Guillaume. Bonjour à tous et merci.
Thank you, Guillaume. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Now you get it.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
To engage with you in English is high for normal reasons. As a third-party evaluator, we need, within the value chain that has been created, to be given the resources to go against peer pressure when there is a need to, as I was just doing now, which is not easy, for obvious reasons, normal reasons. And to establish voluntary commitment implementation that is going to incentivize safety by design, which is needed because of the technology that we have on our table, which is a deep, complex black box. We need to create not an ecosystem only, a value chain, a well-balanced value chain that incentivizes three functions that surround the notion of audits. Internal audits, this is what we've heard from the companies. Regulatory backstop audit, this is what we're hearing from UK Safety Institute, hopefully from the US Safety Institute in the future, and also third-party evaluation that stands in the bill. I represent a French company building technology at that intersection. Our technology is a technology called behavior elicitation tool. Red teaming is a product that helps close the elicitation gap when we measure dangerous capability evaluation. And if I project all of us at the frontier of where we are, third-party evaluators on this question, one of the things I worry about, typically in terms of the peer pressure and how you enable us to confront it, pertains to the danger of what we call dirty patching. When we identify a vulnerability, we in fact scan an attack surface of a black box that no one can fathom and that no one can understand. And so what we do there, when we identify the vulnerability as evaluator, comes in tension with the legitimate interests of those who developed these technologies. And yes, it would be tempting to use the prompts and the vulnerabilities that we have identified and feed them into the fine-tuning stage simply. If we do that, what is it that we have patched collectively? Is it a vulnerability? Has the vulnerability generalized? Has the model generalized? Well, we are not sure that it's the case. And that's why it's important that small actors like us, as well as bigger actors, are given the, in a way, operational, legal, not protection, but support to ensure that safety by design arrives. And that won't arrive by chance, that won't arrive by mistake. And that's why we need capacity building on those three efforts: internal audit, regulatory backstop audit, and third-party evaluation that is there to serve other types of interests. And maybe in closing, I think that we are collectively going to set the boundary between safety enhancing and safety washing in how we collectively respond to Rob's opening remark on our collective commitment to metrology. Metrology on AI is a challenge of a generation. It's a challenge that amounts to building an aircraft as we are flying it at higher and higher speed. And as a Frenchman from the country that contributed enormously to metrology in its history, that's one of the reasons why we selected France as a country to build PRISM Eval, our commitment to this is because of the black box. This phenomena that we have to govern, we do not understand as engineers. It is really the priority. If, from how we respond to that commitment to metrology, science, not science washing. And it's going to be difficult because we have to move fast. When you have to move fast, it's tempting to do science washing. It's tempting to go along the peer pressure, while at times we need to go against peer pressure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. Then last, we have Simon Campos, who is the founder and director of Safer AI, or all is in the name, I think. In a very short time, please.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's an honor to be here. So Safer AI is a French AI risk management nonprofit, and we are focused on providing accountability, which many here have called as something that there's a need for, like Clara Shepaz, Michael, or Alexandra. And we think that it's very important that this accountability be done in a way which is highly understandable to non-technical public as well, the general public, investors, or policymakers. So we published the first AI risk management maturity ratings of leading AI developers. AI developers like OpenAI, Google DeepMind, Anthropic, xAI, Meta, or Mistral AI. Those AI risk management maturity ratings are based on best practices from other industries. Risk management is not a new science. We don't have to reinvent everything. And they've been supported by Turing Award winner Yoshua Bengio. Our ratings have revealed two core insights. The first is that there are two different groups of companies that are very visible. The first are the front runners are OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google DeepMind, with Anthropic in the lead. They are between 1 and 2.5 on our rating on their responsible scaling policies, preparedness framework, and equivalent commitments and their implementation. The second cluster of companies, which we call the laggards, xAI, Meta, and Mistral, are between 0 and 1 and still have a lot to do. As you see, the grades are overall not high. The best grade is 1.9 out of 5. So there's still a lot of progress to be done in the industries. Industry-wide, there's a lot of variance on how strong and how weak companies are. There are some parts of risk assessment, like model evaluations, where companies are quite strong. They've been in the lead of the development of this work. But there are other parts like risk modeling or estimating risk as a probability or a severity, which is something which is extremely classic in other risk management domains where no one is very good yet. So we hope that our work helps companies and also the general public understanding better how companies are doing and how they can improve. You can learn more on our website, ratings.safer-ai.org. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Simeon. Then in the last 13 minutes, we'd like to talk about the future. Of course, the near future will be the San Francisco conferences and the Paris Action Summit, of course. But Henri Verdier, who is the French ambassador for digital affairs, can share his view on this. And then I will ask Mr. Zheng to give the view from China, which is also very important for the future. Henri, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Guillaume. So I think I will resist to the friendly peer pressure, and I will speak in French. First, because French diplomacy is supposed to speak in French, and then because we have an excellent interpretation. I don't know if you did notice, but we have a world-class interpretation. So let's use this. So I switch in French. You have the translation. On a entendu beaucoup de choses très positives sur le.
We heard a lot of positive things on self-regulation and voluntary commitments. I would like to stress that France deeply believes in this multi-stakeholder approach. It was shown in the Global Digital Compact. We defended that approach, and for many reasons, one of which is we believe companies are the ones who can find the solutions under the peer pressure. And we would like to have a governance framework based on transparency, audit, accountability, more than having this vertical means of controlling from bureaucrats. So we are fully on board. Now, there are elements we did not discuss this morning. We heard that we need to rebuild trust. Well, trust with consumers. We want to protect consumers. We need to provide safeguards, guarantees. We heard that we need to try and picture what developers go through. Well, we also need to think of teenagers who commit suicide because of bullying. We talked about safety, but in France, we believe there are other issues to tackle. Intellectual property, for example, linguistic diversity and cultural diversity, energy consumption. Those issues also require strong governance frameworks. I was an entrepreneur myself. There's an arms race, and you can't ask companies to slow down on their own if their competitors aren't doing that. So the level playing field needs to stem from public powers with common rules that apply to all stakeholders. And, of course, it was discussed but not enough. There's a shift in paradigm. If we want to have this democratic approach, then citizens, societies need to have their say. And we believe those commitments are quality commitments, but we can't solely rely on companies, otherwise there is no democracy. So we need to address all of those issues, which is why we have this Paris summit that is very open to many countries. We're waiting. We should expect 60 to 80 representatives of state, and openness to companies too. And the event will last a week for many discussions to be held, many meetings to be organized. We want the summit to bring us forward, help us advance the co-governance endeavor we have. But we will stress the need for political discussions on regulation too.
Because we are running out of time, I will stop there, but that's some points I wanted to make with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henri. Then we have Mr. Ye Zheng from the Chinese Academy of Science. So your view is very interesting. Please.
Thank you. So I think I like the wording of trusted AI in many ways, talking about the future. So I wanted to say firstly that our goal is towards trustworthy AI. instead of now you have trustworthy AI, right? Now actually AI, the current state of AI is not that trusted. For now, we have to be very frank as scientists and engineers and companies towards general public, that we are working our best, but we're working towards that instead of having that. And also talking about the idea of trustworthiness, instead of only focusing on safety, of course, I think ethics, transparency, fairness, and accountability are also core issues that we have to solve. So when Huri said that we need to extend our vision to, provide a much better AI, so I think this has to be very clear. On the other side, I'll have to say, this is also true for AI safety for the future. And now we're arguing that our large language models are much safer and safer. Well, on the other side, when you ask, let's say, we ask 100 questions ethical questions to large language models, the most powerful ones can get 95% of the right ones. But when you change each and every of the questions in 100 different ways to ask them, and then the accuracy actually drops down to 60% roughly to the most powerful language models. So that means that it will be very hard for human alignment, to tune the models to be really ethical in all cases. So I think this has to be changed for the near future. Otherwise, it's already been in service of the society. Let me be frank that the current large language models is actually engineering systems with many engineering efforts and tricks. It's not only about algorithmic optimization. And now many of the companies are not that open of everything that they have done for engineering system. So by having red teaming only solve a small portion of the problems, we have to be very frank on this, that you have to have much better ways to keep AI safe, right? And also for the future, we need to move from AI safety to safe AI in a way that now, let's talk about the idea of jailbreaking. So what is in jail? The prisons, the prisoners, right? So that means AI can do good and also do bad. You ask them to do good, but for the scenarios that you didn't, they're still behaving bad. So this is why people prefer to use the word jailbreaking. So I think safe AI, to differentiate with AI safety, is that safety should be the first principles that cannot be violated, that cannot be deleted in all cases. So this is very different compared to, fix some of the bugs for AI, just pick something on, the missing holes. So I think that is the real future. That we have to build, that we have to move from AI safety to safe AI. So very quick about the advancement in China. I think the model is somewhat complementary. That through these 20 years of research related to AI for ICT, there are multiple institutions and universities doing services for different cities, for different ministries in China. So the choice for the Chinese government is not to have the National AI Safety Institute. Instead of having a trying from the ground up, building Beijing AI Safety Institute, Shanghai, and Shenzhen ones as initial tryings, and then we organize everything together as AI safety, Chinese AI safety network that actually collect all the efforts together and make all the mappings towards each other. It will be very hard, for the size of countries like China, for the different ministries, for coordination, it's really a huge issue. But for now, we're using Chinese AI safety network to do all the mappings across different ministries. They are not really that willing to map to each other, but it will be the scientists and the engineers to help them to map them all together. I think this is also the beauty of from the bottom up that we have Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen Institute for AI Safety or Lab of AI Safety. Well, from the top down, that a network of AI safety within the country helps. Last but not least, I'm gonna talking about the current state. It could be, I think, a global effort on AI safety is truly needed, but it's not the current story. I think I'm very grateful to be invited for the Bletchley meeting and also the Seoul meeting to represent the Chinese academia. Well, on the other side, I think the current movement for network of AI Safety Institute, the Chinese government has been blocked again without invitation for the San Francisco meeting. And this is also true for us, for Beijing AI Safety Institute. So I think at the Bletchley meeting, if you go back to the YouTube, so what I say is that when people were wondering, should I follow UK or the US AI Safety Institute for the future? And then what I said is that I suggest all the 28 countries to have your own safety institute in the first place. And what's really count is to have the network of AI Safety Institute. I'm glad the idea has been picked up by the Seoul version. I'm truly glad, which has not been picked up for what I'm saying at the Bletchley meeting, is that I would suggest that the AI Safety Summit could extend to 40 countries, even to 60. I'm glad to hear about Henry introducing that the AI Action Summit will have 60 or 80 countries to be involved. So I think that is the way to do truly global coordination on AI safety. So I'm going to end by saying regional networks like OECD, like the current tryings of network of AI Safety Institute, I think essential components for global AI governance, but it's not all about it. We need roles like the United Nations to weave all the regional networks all together and put the efforts as a global, as a weaving efforts. Not disabling of all the efforts, but to weave all the efforts all together and then to complement in a way that something which is missing for the regional networks, then let's rely on some other more trustworthy organizations to take the actions like the United Nations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very clear. Maybe just a few seconds, Tatiana, on the code of conduct, which is the next step for the application of the AI Act.
Very briefly, yeah, I know that we are running over time, so many things have been mentioned. So indeed, in European Union now, together with many stakeholders from industry, but also from member states and other stakeholders, we work on the code of practice to address the calls which have been made here to make very practical guidance to the providers and users of general purpose AI technologies, especially the most advanced models. What does risk management means? What risks needs to be mitigated and how? And indeed, as Simeon said, we try to build as much as possible on existing methodologies for risk management and risk mitigation. And for this, for example, our work of over 2 years on high-risk AI systems was at the standardization organization. It's very useful. So we hope to bring together international standardization organizations, metrologies, discussions at the policy level, but also industry-led initiatives. And hopefully that will become kind of state-of-the-art for practical measures related to GPI models. And we hope to complete this work by summer, spring next year. So because obligations from AI Act will enter into force in August 2025. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so we're now running out of time, sorry. it's very short, 1 hour and a half, when we talk about so important questions. And what we see is that all the stakeholders, we all have huge responsibilities to be sure that we develop secure, trusted AI. And we need to do it all over the world, for sure. So during the French AI Action Summit, it will not be a French summit, it will be an international summit in Paris. On the trust track, what we call trust track, we will talk again about science with the report of Joshua Benjo, which will be the final report, which is just one step, and we need to develop how to keep running this very interesting analysis. We will also talk about solutions for cyber. We talked about it a bit, about disinformation. We will talk about the safety institutes and the network of safety institutes, and we hope it will be as open as possible. We'll talk again about voluntary commitments after the San Francisco conference, and also about the code of conduct. Okay, it's already a lot, but if you have any proposition of topics you would like to see in Paris, don't hesitate to contact me. We want to make it as open and as inclusive as possible. And you can imagine that we cannot talk about everything, but any good idea will be very welcome. So thank you very much for this very, very interesting round table. It's interesting to see so many people involved into building a better future. And I hope you will have a good day for this Paris Peace Forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you.